How's it guys? I'm Clarice, you're on the Live Ready channel, and often we overlook some of the really fantastic survival resources that we have in our environment. Something as simple as the humble pine tree can provide us with protein, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins and minerals that we need, as well as a valuable fire making resource. Pine has been used since the 18th century to treat scurvy because of its high vitamin C content. And what they used to do is they used to take the pine needles and they used to bruise them a little bit, boil them up into a tea, and then drink that tea, and that gave them a wonderful high vitamin tea. Now this is a good example of a tree that you can use to create pine needle tea in order to substitute your diet in any survival scenario. Come on, let's have a look, boy. You can eat as much grass as you like. And I'm just going to take a branch of this and then we'll go and make some tea. Boy. There we go. Tuck my shirt in again. And we'll grab a couple of pine cones. And I'll show you how you can get the pine nuts out. There we go. The first thing that we think of when we think of pine as a resource is fatwood or resin, something that burns really well and a source of firewood or fuel for your fire that helps you to start a fire really easily. And what fatwood is basically the heartwood of a tree that has a lot of resin, and that resin accumulates in some of the branches or where the branch meets the trunk, especially in standing deadwood or in pine that's died and is still standing upright. If you cut through a branch, you'll find that there's a lot of resins, like sticky business, that's accumulated there that you can use to easily make fire with because it's highly flammable. And even if you don't find fatwood per se, if you can just accumulate some of the resin from a branch or something that has broken off, that is also highly flammable, and you can just pick it off with a stick or with the tip of your knife. So to make pine needle tea, I first got to get a fire going, and I've got this resinous piece of wood that's got that nice cakey bit of resin on the top, and I'm just going to use that to get my fire started. I've got some nice pine needles here, and they'll burn really easily. It makes for really nice kindling and tinder, and then some pine cones that I'm going to use. There's a really nice bit of resin sitting at the top there, so all of that part up there is going to be really good to use. And it really helps to have a sharp knife here. There we go. But not only is this good fire making material, but if you strip the outer bark of a white pine, you can also eat that inner bark for nourishment if you really need to. What I can do in the meantime is I can rinse my pine needles, and I've got a couple here now. So it is best to use a bit of spring water because you know that's relatively clean, or to boil water and then use that. I'm just going to give these guys a good rubbing down. I can really use a hand wash too, actually, by now. And I've got my trusty pot that we're going to boil tea in today. There are some poisonous pines like the yew, the ponderosa pine, the Australian pine, and the Norfolk Island pine, which are actually poisonous and they have poisoned animals before, which I wouldn't recommend anybody go and use to make pine needle tea. But these ones are fine. Most red pines, white pines, all of those are fine. So to prepare these pine needles, all I'm going to do is to remove a couple of them. And this is just from a red pine. And that should be more than enough for 1 cup of tea, and all the little bits on there. And bruising them just helps them to release all that vitamin C and vitamin A that we're looking for. You can use the jimping there, which works nicely. That'll do the trick. Okay, so I'm going to add some water in here. If you have collected water from a stream, then you can boil the water first and then add your pine needles. So let's boil that. Now you may be wondering, how do you get the pine cones to open up to release the pine nuts that I say are so nutritious? And it's actually quite simple. Pine cones actually open up with fires. So naturally there would be a fire every couple of years in a forest or in the wild, and it causes the pine cones to open up. Now, I do believe that they open up naturally as well after a while, and you can pick them and put them in a burlap bag and keep them for a couple of weeks until they open up. Or if you're in a hurry, just put them nearby a fire and you'll see that they start to open up within a few minutes. Put that in the fire and then put my pine cone in there. So now that I've got a rolling boil with my water, I can take it off because I don't want to boil my pine needles, because that will destroy the vitamin C that's in them. So I just want to simmer them. Now I'm going to add them to my water. And just warm water is fine. Now once this pine cone gets to the point where I can peel back, then I can reach the seeds that are inside. So I can take it off the fire now. And obviously let it cool down. Now pine nuts have about the same caloric value of 2.5 McDonald's burgers if you take 100 grams of pine nuts, which is quite a bit. I know the Mediterranean pine or the stone pine has these large nut-like seeds that sit on the inside here. And some of the other types have these little winged seeds that sit on the inside that look something like that. So there are different kinds. And they're very high in vitamin E and omega-6 fatty acids and niacin and what else? Calories. 100 grams of pine nuts have about 13 grams of carbohydrates and about 14 grams of protein. So definitely a very good survival food. And if you want to preserve them, then do toast them, because they have so much fat in them that they can actually spoil over time. So white pines oftentimes have these little seed pods that look like that, and this one's nice and toasty now. And now I've got to break that in order to get to the pine nut that sits on the inside. So what I like to do is I just take my knife and I give it a little bump. Just so it cracks open that hard shell, and then you can get to the nut on the inside. I mean, that's not a whole lot that's coming out of there. But that's actually not too difficult to get to. There you go. Now at this point my pine needle tea is just about ready, and the way I know is that they've discolored. All those pine needles have discolored a bit and they've gone a little bit yellowish. So I know that the water has gotten to them and they have steeped a bit, and it's also cooled down sufficiently for me to drink it. So I can take them out now. Because I've got a little bit of dirt and dust in there, I'm just going to filter them through this cloth. I keep it in my canteen, or I keep it with my canteen and cup. So I'm just going to pour that right in there in lieu of a tea bag. And that's caught up all of that dust and dirt. There we go, pine needle tea. That is honestly a very satisfying cup of tea. And it tastes a bit like a herbal tea, almost a citrusy kind of taste. And I believe the different kinds of pine needles are going to give you slightly different tastes. But it's so worthwhile enjoying in the wild. Well, that's it from me on pine. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember to hit like and subscribe. And until the next time, live really.